They say family is forever, but business? Business has a way of turning loved ones into adversaries and trust into leverage. My name is Isla Carter, and this is the story of how I built an empire from the ground up, only to have it stolen from me by the very people who should have had my back. But here's the thing about people like me, we don't just walk away. When you take everything from someone who built their success on resilience, you don't leave them with nothing. You leave them with a reason to take it all back. 10 years ago, our family business, Carter Innovations, was barely keeping its doors open. It started as a humble electronics repair shop, built from nothing by my father, James Carter, a man who believed in hard work and loyalty, but not necessarily in change. My older brother, Nathan, was the heir apparent, the Ivy League golden boy destined to inherit it all. Me? I was the one fixing things in the back room while working toward my computer science degree at night. Nathan would visit during breaks, strolling through the shop like a guest of honor. "You're too smart to be wasting away here, Isla," he'd say, shaking his head. "You should be doing something bigger." But I already was. While Nathan learned about business strategies in lecture halls, I was watching real customers struggle with outdated software, inefficient inventory systems, and overpriced management tools. So I started coding. At first, it was just a side project, a streamlined system for small businesses like ours. Simple, effective, scalable. I showed it to my father, expecting skepticism. Instead, for the first time, I saw pride in his eyes. "If this works, Isla, you might just save this company," he said. That was all the validation I needed. The early years were grueling, long nights spent staring at endless lines of code, fingers cramping over keyboards, debugging issues that never seemed to end. Every rejection stung. Investors dismissed me, saying I was too young, too inexperienced, or worse, that I didn't have the right business acumen to make it work. But I wasn't just building a company, I was building something real, something that actually solved problems. And little by little, Carter Innovations transformed. The repair shop faded into history, replaced by a company at the forefront of small business tech solutions. My system wasn't just another piece of software, it became the solution, the backbone of countless businesses that had been struggling just like we had. It was affordable, intuitive, and scalable, everything the big-name competitors ignored in favor of high-end enterprise clients. I lived in that world, buried in server updates, feature rollouts, and customer feedback. My team, loyal engineers and developers who believed in what we were creating, pushed harder than ever. And it paid off. By the time we hit $10 million in revenue, we weren't just surviving. We were a force. National clients came knocking. Investors who had once dismissed me were suddenly interested. And tech blogs started calling us one of the fastest growing startups in the industry. Then Nathan came back. He arrived one morning, strolling into the office as if he'd never left, flashing that easy, confident smile. The prodigal son returns. His suit screamed success. His handshake was firm, his presence demanded attention. "Wow, Isla," he said, glancing around at the sleek, modern workspace that had once been a dingy backroom. "You've really done something here." I should have known right then that something was off. Nathan had always been the golden child. The one with the Ivy League degree, the corporate connections, the perfect career path. He was supposed to be the one taking over the family business, not me. And yet, when things got tough, he left. While I was fighting for every contract, every deal, every breakthrough, he was sitting in a high-rise office, crunching numbers for someone else. And now that success was here, now that we had finally made it, he was back, acting like he had never turned his back on us. First, I tried to believe him. Maybe he really did want to help. Maybe he really was proud. And then my father said the words that made my stomach turn. "With Nathan's experience and your innovation, Isla, we're going to take this company to the next level." I should have seen it coming. At first, it was subtle. Nathan positioned himself as a strategic consultant, attending meetings, giving input on financial planning and investor relations. It seemed harmless, useful even. I let it happen. I was too busy with product development, too focused on our next big update, to see the shift happening right under my nose. Then Nathan started referring to himself as co-founder. At a company networking event, I overheard him casually introduce himself to a potential partner. "Yes, my sister and I started this company together. It's been an incredible journey." I nearly dropped my drink. Started it together? Together? I wanted to call him out on it right then and there, but I held back. Publicly arguing with him would only make me look petty. I told myself it was just ego, just Nathan wanting a little credit. I told myself it didn't matter as long as I was still the one making the decisions. I was wrong. It didn't stop there. Suddenly, I started finding myself excluded from key meetings. "Oh, we figured you were too busy with development," they'd say when I confronted them. It was just a high-level discussion about the company's direction. Company's direction? The direction I had spent years building? Then came the interviews. The first time, it was a quote in a business article. Nathan Carter, co-founder of Carter Innovations, is leading the company into an exciting new phase. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. The next time it was worse. A full-length feature in a major magazine. A spread about our company, our technology, our success. Except I wasn't mentioned once. Instead, there was Nathan, photographed in our office, talking about his vision for the company's future. The future I had built. I stormed into my father's office, article in hand. "Did you see this?" asked, voice sharp with frustration. He barely looked up. "Nathan's just helping with publicity, Isla. You know how these magazines work. They want a polished story." A polished story? Or rewritten history? I spat. I saw it then, the way my father hesitated. The way he wasn't entirely on my side. I walked out, my pulse pounding in my ears. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone else had gone home, staring at the framed patents on my wall. The ones that bore my name. I knew what was happening. And I knew that if I didn't stop it soon, I'd wake up one morning and realize that the company I built was no longer mine. But nothing prepared me for the night everything changed. My father's 65th birthday, a grand, over-the-top event orchestrated by Nathan. The invitation list read like a who's who of the business world: investors, corporate executives, media figures. The venue was a 5-star ballroom. Chandeliers casting an opulent glow over the sea of tailored suits and evening gowns. It was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it was an ambush. From the moment I arrived, something felt off. There was a buzz in the air, a subtle but unmistakable undercurrent of expectation. Conversations hushed slightly when I walked past. Eyes flickered toward me before quickly darting away. I knew that look. Pity. I pushed the feeling aside, moving through the crowd with my usual polite nods, making my way toward my father. But before I could reach him, the lights dimmed slightly, and the familiar sound of a champagne glass clinking cut through the hum of conversation. Nathan stood at the center of the room, microphone in hand. His signature confident smile plastered across his face. The room fell into an expectant silence. "First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate our incredible father, James Carter, a man whose vision, dedication, and hard work built the foundation that allows us to stand here today." Applause. Warm, appreciative. I forced myself to relax. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe this really was just a toast. Nathan continued. "And as we look toward the future, it's important to recognize that great legacies evolve. They adapt. They grow." Something twisted in my gut. Which is why, as of today, I am honored to announce that I will be stepping in as CEO of Carter Innovations, leading us into our next great chapter. Applause exploded around me. My blood turned to ice. CEO? I barely registered the clapping, the congratulatory nods, the raised glasses. The room around me felt suddenly distant, voices muffled, like I was submerged underwater. My breath hitched in my throat as I turned toward my father. He wouldn't meet my gaze. Because he already knew. Nathan wasn't finished. "Some people," he continued, his voice dripping with the careful politeness of someone pretending to be gracious, "are better suited for technical roles rather than leadership." That's when I felt it. The shift. The unspoken understanding rippling through the crowd. Investors nodding. Executives exchanging looks. Journalists scribbling in their notepads. The realization hit like a freight train. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This had been planned, coordinated, executed flawlessly. They weren't surprised. I was the only one who hadn't seen it coming. I swallowed hard, my hands curling into fists beneath the table. My nails dug into my palm, the sharp sting grounding me, keeping me from reacting because reacting wouldn't change a damn thing. Nathan glanced at me then, just for a fraction of a second, as if daring me to say something. To object. To fight. I refused to give him the satisfaction. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed back my chair. The legs scraped against the marble floor, the sound slicing through the air like a blade. The applause had died down now. The room was still, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the silence. I walked forward, steady, controlled, past the clusters of guests watching with barely concealed curiosity, past the journalists who had their pens poised, ready to document whatever spectacle they hoped would unfold, past Nathan, whose smirk barely faltered. I reached my father's table. He finally looked up at me then. Not with pride, not with regret, just acceptance. As if this was simply how things were meant to be. I didn't waver. I didn't blink. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small, neatly wrapped package, and placed it in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad." My voice was calm, steady, measured, but my hands were trembling. And then I turned and walked out. The whispers followed me, a wave of hush murmurs and sideways glances. The stares burned into my back. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. Not even once. You don't steal from a builder and expect them to walk away empty-handed. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned, while the rest of them were still basking in their so-called victory. Drinking champagne and shaking hands, I sat alone in my office, staring at the city's skyline, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest like a vice. But beneath the anger, beneath the humiliation, there was something else, clarity. Nathan thought he had won. My father thought this was how things were meant to be. They believed I was just going to accept it, to fade into the background while Nathan took over what I built. They were wrong. By the time the sun rose, I had set everything in motion. The proprietary software that powered 80% of Carter Innovations' revenue, not owned by Carter Innovations. It belonged to my separate company, registered years ago under an LLC. Nathan never even bothered to check who actually owned the intellectual property that made the company valuable. Client contracts? Bound by personal loyalty clauses to me. The businesses that relied on our technology had signed agreements tied directly to my name, not the company's. Intellectual property rights? Set to expire unless I renewed them. And I had no intention of doing so. At precisely 9 a.m., I walked into the boardroom, my heels echoing against the polished marble floor. The air was thick with smug confidence. Nathan sat at the head of the table, leaning back in my father's old chair, exuding the easy arrogance of a man who believed he had already won. My father sat beside him, arms crossed, as if daring me to make a scene. The rest of the executives, some I had known for years, some I barely trusted, were watching with veiled curiosity. They all thought this was over. I placed my tablet on the table and, with a flick of my fingers, cast a series of documents onto the massive conference room screen. "Let's talk about ownership," I said, my voice steady. Nathan's smirk faltered. My father's brow furrowed. I zoomed in on the first document. Legal ownership filings. This, I continued, tapping the screen, is the ownership structure of the core software suite that accounts for 80% of Carter Innovations' annual revenue. You'll notice something interesting. It doesn't belong to Carter Innovations. It belongs to me. Silence. Nathan's fingers curled slightly against the table, his composure wavering. "That's not possible." I turned to him, arching a brow. "Oh, but it is. See, years ago, while you were busy climbing the corporate ladder somewhere else, I was actually building this company. And unlike you, I planned ahead. I kept the intellectual property separate. The only reason Carter Innovations was able to use my software was through a licensing agreement, which, as of midnight last night, expired." I swiped to the next document. The termination notice. Nathan paled. My father's jaw tightened. "This is absurd, Isla." I met his gaze, unflinching. "What's absurd is thinking you could erase me from my own company and still expect to profit off my work." I tapped the screen again, pulling up client contracts. One by one, I enlarged each name, each logo. And here's where it gets really interesting. Most of our major clients sign with Carter Innovations because of me. Their contracts have personal loyalty clauses, meaning that if I leave, they have the option to terminate their agreements. A sharp intake of breath from one of the board members. I glanced at him. "Check your emails." Nathan was already reaching for his phone. His eyes scanned the screen, and for the first time, his expression cracked. The emails had already gone out. I leaned forward slightly. "Would you like to know how many clients triggered their termination clauses overnight?" I swiped again. A long, scrolling list of client terminations filled the screen. A murmur rippled through the room. My father closed his eyes briefly, realization sinking in. Nathan, on the other hand, wasn't ready to concede. This is sabotage. His voice was lower now, controlled but laced with fury. You're deliberately destroying what we built. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. We? You keep using that word. But you didn't build this, Nathan. I did. And you tried to take it from me. I sat back, crossing my arms. So here's where we stand. You have no proprietary software. No major clients. And in case you're wondering about our employees, I swiped one final time, revealing resignation notices from key team members, engineers, developers, product managers. All of them had chosen to leave. Through the glass walls, I could already see employees gathering in small groups, checking their emails, whispering amongst themselves. The dominoes were falling. Nathan looked at my father, desperate now. Daddy. But my father had gone still, his expression unreadable as he stared at the screen. He looked at me then. And I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. Respect. Nathan turned back to me, but I spoke first. You have two choices. The room held its breath. Option 1, I walk away. I take my software, my clients, and my employees. Carter Innovations collapses, and you get to explain to our investors why the company's valuation just dropped to zero overnight. Nathan swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists. Option 2, you resign. Effective immediately. I take full control of Carter Innovations. And you, I turn to my father, step back as a silent partner. You'll retain your shares, receive dividends, but you will have no say in operations. Silence stretched. I let my words settle. Let them feel the weight of their mistake. Nathan's face burned red with fury. You planned this all along, didn't you? His voice was tight, barely controlled. You were just waiting for the right moment to stab us in the back. I let out a short laugh, humorless, sharp. No, Nathan. I spent 10 years trying to be a good daughter, a good sister. And the entire time, you both took me for granted. I only planned this. I glanced at my watch. About 12 hours ago, after you called me irrelevant in front of everyone we know. My phone buzzed. Another client termination notice. Time was running out. I leaned forward. What's it going to be? The next hour was a blur of legal filings and signatures. And by noon, Nathan was no longer CEO. I was. 1 year later, Carter Innovations had tripled in value under my leadership. The company was no longer just a family business, it was an empire. A streamlined, high-performing machine with international clients, cutting-edge technology, and a reputation for excellence and resilience. Investors who once hesitated were now eager to get in. Publications that once overlooked me now ran headlines about the woman who reclaimed her empire. Nathan? He was gone. Disgraced. Forgotten. After signing his resignation, he tried to stay relevant, latching onto whatever venture he could find. But the industry had already moved on. His credibility was shattered. The business world had seen him for what he was, a fraud who tried to steal a throne that was never his to begin with. My father. He retired soon after. I think in his own way he finally understood. He had spent years believing that Nathan was the rightful heir, the golden child who would carry on his legacy. And yet, in the end, it was me who built something lasting. I never heard him say he regretted his choices, but I didn't need to. His silence said enough. We still see each other on holidays, exchanging polite smiles and small talk. But the wounds between us run deep. Some things don't heal. Some things just scar over. And Nathan, he barely meets my eyes. Maybe it's shame. Maybe it's anger. Or maybe it's the weight of knowing that he had everything handed to him and still lost. Sometimes late at night, I look at old photographs, the repair shop, my father when he still believed in me, the brother I once admired. I feel a flicker of something, nostalgia, loss, maybe even grief. Not for what I lost, but for what could have been. Because once upon a time, I thought we were building this together. I thought we were a family first before anything else. But family doesn't betray you. Family doesn't try to erase you. And I remember the way Nathan smiled that night, standing on that stage, thinking he had won. I remember the way my father nodded along, letting it happen. I remember the moment I realized that I had never really belonged to them, that I had always been on my own. And I remind myself, respect is earned, not inherited. This is the power of knowing your worth. Some people build legacies, others steal them. But when the dust settles, Only one of them is left standing. That's why I built something even bigger. This time on my own terms.